Welcome back to another episode of Inside SFPS. My name is Cody Donarski, Public Information Officer with Santa Fe Public Schools, and today I am joined by a very special guest. Today I am joined by the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Santa Fe Public Schools, Peter McWain. Mr. McWain, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Cody. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining me today. Very excited about this episode. I say this every time, but I do mean it. Once again, I have so much respect for you, and I think it's interesting where our friendship kind of started was a very unique place that we both share in common, Binghamton, New York. We'll get to that in a little bit. I want to go back even further because I know Binghamton is not the starting place of your story. It's actually Michigan. So talk about, you grew up in Michigan, correct?
Yes, I grew up in West Michigan.
So what town is that? Like, how far are you from like a place that we would know?
Well, typical Michigander usually raises up their hand and points to their hand of where they're from. But since we're on a podcast, I'm about halfway up the west coast of Michigan in a little town called Muskegon.
Muskegon? How many people? What was the population?
Around 60,000 people.
Oh, okay. So it was like a fairly big-ish town. It wasn't like like a very small little village. It was a big enough town
Big-ish.
or city. Yeah,
Absolutely.
And so you went to school, graduated high school, and I think one of the reasons why I think your story is so special is despite your title of being the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, you weren't necessarily the best student. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was a fantastic student of life, but perhaps I didn't understand the game when I was in high school. I absolutely had to retake Algebra 1, the number one most failed course in the United States. I, too, fell victim to this course. Had to take it 3 times. My parents were pretty conservative and extremely supportive, so anytime I got below a C in a course, I had to go to the community college, sign up for credit recovery through the college, and pay for it myself. So I learned in short order that I really needed to be present in all of my endeavors, and I owe my parents for that lesson.
Did that start in high school? Was that in middle school? Was that kind of throughout? Where did that kind of really start from?
I was kind of a wild child, so my parents had lots of systemic supports to help ameliorate the impact of my ADHD, and that practice started in high school.
Okay. What did your parents do?
My dad sold used cars, and my mom raised our family.
Oh, so you had, your dad, and then your mom was how many siblings did you have?
I have 2 older brothers. My brother Paul is 8 years older than me, and my brother Fred is older than him. And then I have a younger sister who is 8 years younger than me.
Oh, wow. So a big gap between all of you guys.
Absolutely. We're all kind of like only children and middle children at the same time.
That's interesting. So after you graduated high school, what was kind of your plan? Like, did you even have a plan?
So in high school, my parents really valued work, except I was not allowed to work during the school year. So during the summertime, I'd pick up jobs. My first job I had in high school and middle school was picking blueberries. I worked on a blueberry farm for years, hand picking Jersey blueberries by the pound. And that really instilled a sense of work ethic in me, and also made me realize that I didn't want to do hard labor for the rest of my life. My parents told me that when I graduated high school, I had a few options. I could go to college, I could join the military, or I could move out. January of my senior year, I applied to one college, a liberal arts school close to home, and I was lucky enough to get in.
What school was that?
Grand Valley State University.
And then what was did you have a major that you wanted to pursue, or were you kind of going, because I know some kids when I was in school, they would go to a school and kind of just take their generals, and then that way, junior or senior year, they could really start focusing on your major. Did you have anything that you wanted to study?
I had a lot of interest. I never worked with a college advisor or declared a major until I realized it was required to graduate, which that was my last year of college. So I really followed my course loads by my interests, which led me to taking classes focusing on geology, taking classes focusing on philosophy and music. I really went to college initially just to acquire knowledge, not necessarily to transition into work. And as I went through that experience, I started to realize that I did have some skills, and I had some skills that perhaps I had to learn how to focus.
And so when you were finishing up in college, I know you said you were there more to acquire knowledge than to kind of get yourself on a career path. Was there anything that you wanted to do, or were you just like, I just want to absorb as much knowledge as I can and, I'll figure it out when the time comes?
Yeah, I really wanted to do everything, and that's still kind of the struggle that I have. At the end of my fourth year of college, I roughly had my undergraduate focus and my minor focus, the coursework down, and I had enough credits to get a degree in earth science, and then I realized I needed to get employed in this field, and I really wasn't feeling the oil and gas industry, which is where a lot of those degrees go to. So throughout my undergrad experiences, I was a peer educator. So I would teach the freshman seminar classes through the counseling department at Grand Valley State, which I must say was the best education I've ever received in my entire life. And through those experiences, I really discovered that being an educator is a good thing. And that being an educator, you can really help elevate the people around you. And that really led to some field experiences in teaching, which then transitioned to me applying to the School of Education and spending a fifth year in my undergrad to get my teaching degree.
So you got your teaching degree. So it was kind of like the end of your senior year is where you started to maybe see a career path for yourself in that teaching. So at the fifth year, you got your teaching license. Where did that take you next? Did you start teaching in Michigan? Did you leave and go somewhere else? What kind of did you do once you got your teaching license?
When I got my teaching license in Michigan, I stayed for 3 years. I was working at a school, Steele Middle School. It was taken over by the state for not meeting annual yearly progress. My first year teaching, I was a substitute teacher in a math class. I was the seventh teacher in that room that year. And all instructional materials and all resources for students were gone. All students were failing their classes. When I walked in, I approached the students authentically as just a human being, and saw them for who they were for themselves, and then transitioned down into the gym, where we started to do kinesthetic activity and then collected data on what we were doing. And then we used that authentic data really to drive our inquiry. At the end of the year, most of my students were passing math. Most of them liked math, and state scores increased.
That's incredible. That's got to be difficult to be a student. And I can't speak to this because I was blessed enough to go to a school at a time when I think teaching was really at a high. Didn't really ever struggle with getting a full-time teacher into a classroom. And I know in New York State, where I went to school, teaching salaries were a livable wage. You could be a teacher and be the head earner in the household. What is that like coming into a classroom as the seventh teacher and being like, having to be like, oh, this is just another one in this cycle of, all right, we got another teacher. Let's see how long this one lasts before we go through. Like, as a teacher, how do you walk into a situation like that and try to be the difference in these kids' lives? Because, 6 teachers prior to you didn't work out.
It's amazing. I don't know if everybody realizes the opportunities they have in their life to make a real change. I feel like education is a calling for me more so than it is a career for me. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. I was never a great student in high school and didn't really have that connection with my teachers in high school and was kind of jaded on the whole educational system in a whole. So when I was given this opportunity to approach students as human beings and to follow their interests to support them meeting their goals, it was like a breath of fresh air. And it really just kindled my love for teaching, and it really compelled me to apply for continuing employment at that school district at Steele Middle School in Muskegon, Michigan.
Oh, so you were at home too. Steele was in. So was it a school that you had gone to, or was it just a school in your district?
I went to a Catholic primary school and high school, and this was a school at the adjacent district to where I lived. Okay.
And then so once your time finished in Steele Middle School, what was kind of your next step? I'm always fascinated by the progression of teaching because it's in other careers, like if you think of business, you start at the very low end and then you work your way up to like a business analyst and then like a senior this and then a chief this. And, there's kind of a very normal structure to elevating within a company. What was your kind of plan after those 3 years? What was your next step? What did you want to do?
My real plan was to get married to my beautiful wife, and she lived in Binghamton, New York, going to Binghamton University. So I moved to New York, and I was fortunate enough to get employment at Dryden High School in Dryden, New York, where I was teaching high school science in 3 different leveled layers of high school science to freshmen.
So that's where our connection comes in. I remember the first time we had met, I'd found out you went to Cortland. And we'll talk about how you got to Cortland or whatever. And I was like, oh, I know Cortland. I went to Binghamton University. I lived in Binghamton. And then you had brought up Speedies. And Speedies, for anyone who doesn't know, is a regional, I guess, dish, you could call it, of cubed chicken marinated in a Speedy sauce, which is like an Italian dressing almost, but it's not. It's got different flavors and stuff. And there's a whole festival in Binghamton, Speedy Fest, and they have their own little hot air balloon fiesta with like 6 balloons. But Speedies are the big thing. And I remember we bonded over Speedies. So when you were at Dryden, you were teaching science, and that's kind of your wheelhouse, right? Like science is is that where you wanted to teach? Because I also think there's this interesting thing where I've spoken to teachers who have a passion that they went to school for, but a lot of them don't like teaching their passion. They actually like teaching something else. Like, oh, I loved math, but I became a science teacher and fell in love with it. Was that did you like teaching your passion?
I think I like the act of teaching, and science seemed like a low point of entry, because science is designed in a way that really catalyzes hands-on, minds-on student participation. And so I think I was just lucky enough to have an expertise in an area that really matched an area that students were interested in and that I excelled in.
So I'd mentioned you ended up at SUNY Cortland. How did that come about?
So when I was going to school at Dryden, the district has a policy of earning your master's degree. I did not have a master's yet, so I enrolled at SUNY Cortland to study earth sciences and science education, where I pursued and earned a master's degree in that field.
So you had spent how many years in we'll call it the southern tier, because Cortland's about an hour away from Binghamton. So you were there for how many years?
I was in the southern tier for roughly a decade. My first 5 years, I got tenured at Dryden High School teaching earth sciences and freshmen. And then from there, I transitioned to SUNY BOCES, or to BOCES. Yep. Pardon me, it's not a SUNY, it's just BOCES.
Yep.
And there I started an academy that focused on catalyzing green careers. So it was an academy specifically for high school seniors. I pulled from several different school districts, and we tracked students into work-based learning, and work-based learning that was connected with sustainability. So it was an amazing experience, because when you think of sustainability, you think of recycling and lowering carbon emissions, or in fact, if you're working to drive whatever industry you're involved in into being cleaner, more productive, more human-focused, focusing on perhaps the triple bottom line of people, profits, and place.
And I think that's interesting. What year approximately was this?
It was before 2008, because I know when I was in New York, the 2008 crash happened.
Oh, right. Yeah, and that's interesting, because I feel like that, and I hate to age anyone, but I was in about 8th grade at that time, so I wasn't too familiar with what was going on in the world outside of my little sphere of knowledge. But that seems a little early for the time, if that makes sense. I know it was really like mid-10s when sustainability and green efforts really started taking off. And even here at the district, work-based learning has taken off in the last year and a half, maybe. So doing that in 2008 was pretty ahead of its time, right?
It was in line with the stimulus package by the Obama administration. There was federal funding to support sustainability projects across the country. It was interesting, because applying for the interview committee did not really understand what sustainability meant, which gave me a beautiful opportunity to really write a student experience that inventoried student interest, looked at the intersection between what students are good at, what they're interested in, and something that serves society. and then working with that student to create an individualized education plan for that year that really tracked them into a myriad of experiences, from working with the mayor's department to working with Lockheed and Martin, to working with the Home Builders Association, and really seeing that transformative experience with the students, and continuing to watch students pursue careers in line with some of their experiences that they had while they were in your class. It's life-changing.
Especially in Dryden, too, because Dryden is a small town, almost village. So being able to do that and get those students kind of connected in a very small district is pretty remarkable. With that, how did you end up here in New Mexico? Because like you, I left Binghamton, New York, and came out to New Mexico, and I was working at KOAT. KOAT is the reason why I came out to New Mexico. So what was kind of your path to come to New Mexico?
After starting the New Visions Academy at BOCES, I then transitioned to supporting the startup of a charter school, New Roots Academy for Sustainability in Ithaca, New York. And that was a beautiful experience. We pulled from 19 school districts there, and again, focused on social justice and sustainability. While I was there, my wife got an opportunity to work for Los Alamos at one of their satellite locations in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and where I was able to procure employment originally as a 6th and 8th grade teacher. I taught 6th and 8th grade for my first year there. Halfway through that year, the district contracted with me to build and write plans to start their early college high school, and I assumed that role, writing the plans to start that school from the ground up. And I transitioned from being a 6th to 8th grade teacher to being the high school biology and chemistry teacher at that school and the directing principal at that school. And that lasted a couple years. And then I moved to their giant middle school, Carlsbad Intermediate School, and that served about 1,000 students. And we put in some systems and protocols that really helped stabilize that school, which then laid the foundation for me to come to Santa Fe.
Out of curiosity, as I've asked a few other people who have taught this question, what was your favorite grade range or age to teach? I've always said people who teach middle school, God bless them, because the hormones and the attitudes that a lot of teenagers get, because that's when they're starting to get their hormones. They don't know how to control themselves. They act out. Like, I've always been like, God bless the 6th, 7th, 8th grade teachers. And so many people are like, that is my favorite age to teach. So I'm curious, because you taught middle school and you taught in the high school. So I'm curious, what was your favorite grade to teach?
I'd have to say whatever grade I'm teaching at that time. The beautiful thing about science is you can really capture that sense of awe. And that sense of awe can really be transitioned into a path that really unleashes the potential of the individual student. So I fall in love with the process of teaching. And yes, I have taught sixth grade up to post-secondary. And really whatever situation I'm in is the situation I'm loving.
Was there a unit that was your favorite? Like, did you like doing volcanoes or natural disasters, or any unit that stands out where you're like, when you know that you have that on your lesson plan, you kind of circle the day like, this is the lesson that I always wait for?
What really got me into science is when I was in middle school, I started to build rockets and started to experiment with shooting rockets and their trajectory. And I did it mostly on my own with the support of my family. And so when I think about a unit that really sets me off, I think it's units that really connect to my student interests, because once you make that connection to what students really want to learn, then you can create an environment where the total is greater than the sum of the constituents.
I always liked earth science the most. Biology never did it for me. I thought I would like chemistry because for whatever reason, I remember thinking this in high school, and like this was a hill I was willing to die on for whatever reason. I always thought of chemistry like cooking, that you would take different ingredients, and if you put them together, something would happen. Like if you put baking soda and baking powder and flour, things would rise. And like I thought of it like that, and then I got to chemistry and I just did not understand it. It was so over my head, and I'm like, chemistry's hands-on. You can see all of this, and it just wasn't it for me. But I remember earth science. Mr. Rodemeyer was my teacher, and I loved it because it was so interactive. It was so engaging. It was very easy to buy into because you had real life things that you could connect to. You want to talk about volcanoes? Here's a volcano. You want to talk about a hurricane? Here's a hurricane. And it's very easy to also be very topical in earth science. If there was an earthquake that happened, next day you come into school, you can learn about an earthquake, and you're learning about it in real time as these things are happening. Or I think when I was in high school, there was these really big mudslides in California. And I remember the next day we came in and Mr. Rodemeyer was playing like the news clips of the mudslides. And then we went and talked about mudslides and why they happen and how they happen and the damage that they cause. And I just found that it was so easy to connect with earth science because there was these real world applications that you could see right in front of you.
I love that you bring that up. And what I hear you saying is that you love the subjects where you felt relevance and a connection to. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, great teachers can do that with all subjects. When just speaking of your landslides, our landslides are happening because of the unique nature of the chemistry of water. When landslides happen, they have a interdependent myriad impacts on life. So that could be pulled into biology and chemistry. You just need a talented teacher to make those connections.
Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. It's funny. I loved science, but I lied. I had wanted to become a radiologist. I don't know why. I think in high school, I, for whatever reason, went through a myriad of injuries. My freshman year, I broke my shoulder playing hockey. The next year, I broke my foot. Broke my wrist. Like I just ended up being around getting x-rays all the time. And I just thought it was fascinating that there were these machines that could look inside your body, see through your skin and your muscle and your tissue and all of this. And you could see damage and be able to fix it and identify it and work through it. And I loved that. And then I heard that it was like 16 years worth of school. And I said, I don't want to be, 32 when I'm finally getting out of school. I was kind of like you. I was a fine student, B student. I put forth the effort that I thought was necessary and never went above and beyond. That was I had a threshold that I hit. I started working when I was 15. I was a sophomore and I would go into work. I worked all throughout high school. I played sports throughout high school. I found that school to me was more networking, meeting people, getting to know people, relationship building. I mean, the same thing kind of went for college. I found myself much more interested in interacting with people, having good conversation, getting to know people, their way their mind thinks. I remember in college, I would just sit at my laptop at my desk and just watch interviews with artists, musicians. I don't want to say celebrities because I didn't like the celebrities as much, but these people who just kind of came up and hearing their mindset, their work ethic and all of that. And I think that's what kind of drew me away from, the math and the sciences towards more media communication, stuff like that. You left Carlsbad, you came to Santa Fe. When you came to Santa Fe, what was your position that kind of brought you up here?
My first job in Santa Fe, I started in October, so it wasn't at the beginning of the school year, and I was teaching 8th grade science at Nina Otero. I was in the classroom for about a month when their instructional coach transitioned to another position outside of the district. I was placed into that position. Where I finished out the year. At the end of that year, my first year in Santa Fe, I applied for a district level position, the assistant director of curriculum and instruction. I was the successful candidate, and I felt like it was an opportunity really for me to start to apply all of the experiences and skills I had acquired from being a teacher in the classroom, working as a consultant, working as a assistant principal and directing a principal and college and career advisor. And I tell you, being in curriculum and instruction really is the funnel for a lot of different aspects of education to come together in confluence under the mission of really supporting student learning.
So for those who don't know, can you explain a little bit as best as you can, because I know you oversee a lot, what your role kind of is with curriculum instruction? Because, when you talk about curriculum instruction, first thing you think of is textbooks and, the materials and all of that stuff. But I know you guys do so much more. So can you talk a little bit about what, I don't want to say your day-to-day operations are, but kind of what you're in charge of and kind of the effect that it has for students, because you guys are pretty hands-on.
Absolutely. Curriculum and instruction supports everything from college and career readiness through CCTE programming, work-based learning. Curriculum and instruction supports all of our core disciplines and all of our elective disciplines from a standard perspective, but also from an organizational perspective. We support like you said, the instructional material adoption process, really supporting teachers leveraging their expertise at identifying peer-reviewed instructional materials that are culturally responsive and really live the values of Santa Fe. We also support professional development. This year or the past 3 years, we've been going through a renaissance of standard-based practices, and curriculum and instruction is a fundamental constituent at supporting that moving forward through professional development, through modeling, through creating professional learning communities that really serve as an echo chamber to proliferate essential information, and also really to leverage the expertise of our community. When we think about solutions in Santa Fe moving forward with increasing student learning, the solutions are here. They've been in front of us the entire time. Every teacher in the classroom is the solution, and creating an environment where the teachers in the classroom can focus on what they're good at, teaching and inspiring students to perhaps push through their perceived limitations. If we can create an environment where teachers can focus on that and create an environment where teachers can work together to achieve that common goal, we're going to start to see our student achievement increase.
Absolutely. And I know we're already starting to see that a little bit with standards-based grading. We have 13 schools that are in full implementation this year, and we're already starting to see some of the benefits and seeing some of our students respond very positively to kind of the initiatives of standards-based grading. The other thing that I know you oversee that I know holds a special place in my heart as well as your heart is the Early Childhood Center over at Ramirez Thomas. My daughter is in the 2Y class. Your daughter is in the 3Y class. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of early childhood ed? Tara Hughes was actually the last guest on the podcast, so I know she has it from a pre-K perspective and especially with her split classroom. But we're starting to see more and more conversation about even earlier than 3 and 4Y. Because I know 4Y is typically where you see pre-K. 3Y kind of extends out a little bit, but the Early Childhood Center serves as young as 1 year old. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of early childhood ed?
Absolutely. The district right now is currently funded from the state to support birth to 5. So really our purview within the community is birth to grade 12. Early childhood is absolutely essential. And there's lots of different theories on how to approach students when they're really entering these school ages. And I tell you what, creating an environment where students can create deep relationships with at least one good adult and have consistency in that relationship in an environment where the teacher and the community supports that child and follows their interests and pushes the depth of their thinking to learn really who they are, then I believe that is the role of early childhood, really to condition the soil so the child can discover who the child is. That knowledge of the self is going to be the ground from which everything else grows. Early childhood research, mountains of research support that it is the most essential area, the most essential years in learning, and having success in early childhood often correlates to lifetime success.
So to finish up, I have 2 things that I've been doing on the last podcast. So this question comes from the We Are Not Strangers game. And so this question that I have is, what would your younger self not believe about your life today?
I'm wearing a tie right now and a jacket, and I work in an office. And my younger self had a hard time sitting in a chair, and I didn't really identify as a reader. I must say, I really struggled with reading until college, until I found an author that unleashed my desire to really want to read. Kurt Vonnegut was that author. And so my earlier self would be blown away that I am in a job where I read all day long, and I'm in charge of a team, and it is a pretty academic position. Whereas when I was younger, I envisioned myself more in a outside kinesthetic sort of position.
I do think, though, you carry yourself in a way that you don't let the office get to you. And and I think I kind of carry myself the same way. If anyone sees me walking down halls, I'm usually bouncing or nodding my head to music, or, you have a little pep in your step that even though you are wearing a suit and a tie and you work in an office, it doesn't bring you to that mindset. You still let yourself have your fun, and, that kid still lives in your head and in your body. So I don't think that the office life has gotten to you all the way. And so with that, the last question that I ask all of my guests that ends the episode is, what was the best piece of advice or guidance that you've ever received from a teacher?
This is an easy one. And I've had a few teachers and mentors tell me things that are in line with this philosophy. Keep moving forward. No matter what, keep moving forward. If you have a job and you get laid off for your job and you can't find another one, go back to school. If you're not happy with where you're at, move. Keep moving forward. And with that, people will give you advice all the time. And their advice is from their experiences. They're not from your perspective. So moving forward and taking the advice of people that are smarter than you and the people that are surrounding you, but knowing what to take and what to leave is very important.